This Choircast podcast is brought to you by How to Not Suck as a Christian. This book is a witty, no BS guide to unlearning the toxic parts of Christianity, like purity culture, apologetics, and the idea that God's love is limited to straight conservative Americans. It's sharp, it's irreverent, and it'll definitely make your fundamentalist aunt clutch her pearls. You can get the audiobook on Audible. Print and ebooks of How to Not Suck as a Christian are available to ship to your aunt wherever books are sold. Welcome to the UnBelief podcast, your journey, actually our journey together beyond inherited beliefs to a spirituality that works for you. I'm your host, Jeremy. I'm a deep skeptic, also a pastor. We can fix that later, right? No? Hi, this is Jeremy. This is the UnBelief podcast, and today's a Smarty Pants episode. So we're going to have an interview here with Keith Giles. He is an author and thinker, and also, if you listen to the podcast, you hear a shout out every week for Keith because he is also runs the podcast network and publishing company that we work with. So his book is called Jesus Unarmed, and this is not a new book, but it has, I think, specific relevance to today. And so, Keith, just 30,000 foot view.
Yeah.
What is Jesus Unarmed? What is the book?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on your show, and this is going to be a lot of fun. Yeah. So the book Jesus Unarmed, I wrote it about. I think I published it about, golly, now probably like 6 years ago. The subtitle is How the Prince of Peace Disarms Our Violence. And it was the final book in this 7-part Jesus book series that I had written. And specifically, I wrote it mostly just out of my own personal frustrations over the last decade or so. It's so funny to me because the only people that are the most skeptical about whether or not Jesus was a nonviolent, radical, revolutionary are evangelical Christians. Atheists totally get it. Like, yeah, Jesus was the, turn the other cheek, love your enemy guy.
Yeah.
There's a really great clip of, I can't think of his name, but he's a comedian and talks about how, that Jesus pretty much invented that hippie stuff, but Christians seem to be the ones, especially in America. I one time had a pastor of a church online. We were going back and forth about whether or not Jesus, preached nonviolence. And he literally said, he was a pastor of a church, and he said, I will kick your ass if you dare to teach that Jesus was nonviolent. Like, wow, this guy has a whole church of people following him. And so I wrote the book mainly to just sort of like, hopefully to convince the people that are the most skeptical, which are evangelical Christians, that no, really, Jesus really meant all that stuff in the Sermon on the Mount. Right. And he didn't just talk about it, he embodied it, he did it.
Yeah. So I feel like in modern parlance, after all, we are streaming on social media. Yeah. What you're saying is that Jesus was woke?
Yeah, a little bit. Yes, and this is the reason why, right? Like Russell Moore, famously former Southern Baptist president, right? Wrote an article on Christianity Today talking about how he was appalled at how many evangelical, conservative Christian pastors won't preach Jesus because he's woke.
I think when I hear the former president of the Southern Baptist Convention say stuff like that, it just blows my mind. And, he and I obviously don't have the same set of beliefs about Jesus and the Bible. However, it gives me a lot of respect for him as a person who can at least sort of begin to be clear-eyed when it comes to the Jesus story. Yeah,
that's right. So, and there are a few people that are like that, and I always wonder if, who knows, maybe they are quietly deconstructing their faith a little bit, but they have something to lose if they just kind of came out and said something. Who knows? Maybe in private you would agree with him a lot more than you think.
Yeah, I wonder. One day, maybe I can get him to live stream, be on the podcast with me.
That would be great.
So you said Jesus actually meant what he said in the Sermon on the Mount. Like, what do you, like for people who have not yet memorized the Sermon on the Mount?
Yeah.
What are the kinds of things that Jesus says there?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like, in the Sermon on the Mount, a lot of things Jesus talks about. It's primarily about the kingdom of God, but he's right. sort of he's talking about the kingdom of God as a present day reality that that's happening right now, and at least the potential for it to happen right now in your actual life today.
Right.
It's not something in the future that's going to happen when the trumpet sounds and Jesus is riding a cloud pony in the sky.
Yeah, for sure.
So in that context, he's telling the people that he's speaking to that this kingdom of God, like, what is it? What is it all about? And one of the he says many times that it's this radical way of sort of turning the world order upside down, right?
Right.
The world as we know it, if you look out the window, has always been this way for at least 2,000 years. Blessed are the guy with the 401k, blessed is the guy with the Lamborghini, blessed is the guy with the second house in Aspen or whatever.
Blessed is those the people really blessed. Mega church televangelist with multiple private planes.
With private jets, exactly. Like those are the people that we observably experience in the world who are quote unquote blessed. And Jesus says, in the context of the kingdom of God, no, the ones that are blessed are the ones that are the poor, the meek, the people, the people that in our world are on the bottom. So it's this upside down idea of the kingdom. And so in that context, he also talks about what it means to be a citizen of this kingdom is to love your neighbor as yourself, to even love your enemies. There's this radical idea. And so, he says things like, we know this, right? We've heard these before, like turn the other cheek, love those, bless those who persecute you, do good to those who hate you. Overcome darkness, not overcome darkness with more darkness, but with light. And so, Jesus says these things. And so that was the positive side of it. The other thing I did in the book was, because I've been talking about this topic for a long, long time, I have heard literally every single objection that evangelical Christians will throw at you to basically hold off the idea that no, Jesus really would probably not own a gun, would probably not want you to join the NRA, would probably not even want you to maybe join the military, because part of the job description would be you might have to kill another human being made in the image of God. And so anyway, in the book, I go through all of the objections, right? And take them one at a time and taking it at face value. Okay, let's look at this example. Is this actually what Jesus is saying? Does this really mean that it's okay for you to own an AK-47 or a Smith & Wesson or whatever, or to use it in self-defense and those kinds of things. So that's the other thing I was doing in the book.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that, in America, we have about 2 guns per person, at least, but Jesus would be part of the 2/3 of America that owns 0 guns.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
And again, that shouldn't shock anybody that's actually read the Gospels, right? Now,
and and Jesus says some pretty critical things about religious people, right? He says in the Sermon on the Mount, he says basically beware of the people who tell you that they are fasting because they've already received their reward, and the same thing about
public, people, and all that stuff. Yeah,
big prayers in public, again, they've already received their reward.
Yeah. The other thing that's really fascinating, and I think I only noticed it as I was putting this book together, something was pretty radical that I had never seen before. That something that Jesus does in the Sermon on the Mount, and I think it's really genius. Jesus, well, first of all, he's very subversive in the way he communicates. So he knows that he's speaking to, again, these are Jewish people under a Roman occupation. Okay. They are living under a Roman occupation in their own land and their own country, and they want, and again they're looking for a Messiah violently who's going to come. In fact, we know historically many came before him and many came after him, and they were all one by one just wiped out by the Roman authorities. So
And like threatening, and those people were saying like, we're going to overthrow the government.
That's right. That's what they wanted. They were looking for a Messiah who could successfully lead an armed insurrection against the Romans and overthrow the Roman occupation and restore Jerusalem right to its former glory. That's what they were hoping for, right?
Right.
And so they really
make Jerusalem great again. Is what you're saying.
Thank you. That's exactly right. He's speaking to a crowd of people with red hats that say, "Make Jerusalem great again," right?
Yeah.
And that's what they're looking for. That's what they are hoping to hear. So in that context, right? And you have to read it carefully to see this is what he's doing. They don't like the Gentiles, right? So then he starts talking about love, and we're not like those Gentiles. I'm paraphrasing, but this is kind of what he's saying. We're not like those Gentiles, are we? No, we don't want to be like them, do we? No, we're better than them. We're not like them. And he says, you know what? You know what they do? They only love those who love them in return. We're going to beat that. We're going to be better than that. You know what? We're going to love people who don't love us. Yeah. What? We're going to love the people that actually hurt us, the people that slap us on the face, the people that force us to walk an extra mile. See, now he's talking about the Gentiles, the Romans. Yeah. And then he says, love your enemies. And he says, but when you do that, when you love your enemy, you're doing what God does. Because this is what God does. God brings rain on the just and on the unjust as well. And then
rain in that context is positive. They're in a culture like sometimes in modern culture, rain is seen as like a negative thing, but in this culture, rain is a good thing because it grows the crop.
In agricultural nature, exactly. And so, but then he caps that whole paradigm shifting ideas off by then saying, and again, I think most people really miss this. After he does all of that, he's talking about, do these radical things. Why? Because this is what God does. And then he says, be holy the way that God is holy. What is that? Holy not by being better than over other people, but by coming down and being with other people and even serving the other people. And he says, be holy like that. God's holiness then is not expressed the way the Pharisees modeled it, which is, we're too holy to be with those dirty sinners. No, be holy the way God is. Like, no, I'm right here with you. And I love you, and I care about you and what's going on in your daily life, and whether you have enough food to feed your family and this kind of stuff. So that's a radical shifting of the context. And again, I think if you get that and you can see that when you read the Sermon on the Mount, then it's almost impossible for you to misunderstand anything else that he says afterwards, that he would be in favor of violence against anyone, right?
Right. Okay, so, Keith, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. One of the things that I get a lot of pushback on online is, I often critique evangelicalism and, very much the things that you were just saying and that I know that you do as well. You do it by writing about 1,000 books a year. I don't know how you do that. Like,
only 2 or 3.
I can barely write one every 2 years. But so the question that I have is, what is it so right now, we have sort of fundamentalist, Christian nationalist, in power. And so what does it mean? And I hate to situate it as an enemy situation, but to sort of just to use those words, love your enemy, pray for those who persecute you. What does that mean for us who are trying to model the behavior of Jesus, to stand up for the immigrants, for the poor, the oppressed, right? To stop nationalism. How do you apply that to this relationship between those of us who are doing that and the Christian nationalist, the fundamentalist? How do we love them, continue to actually do what Jesus said, even in that paradigm?
Yeah, well, I think what's helpful is to kind of take a little bit of a step back away from some of those things. I mean, absolutely, yes, Jesus is saying love your enemies, but your question, how can we do that now? The examples Jesus gives in the Sermon on the Mount are creative. It's creative nonviolence, right? It's take a second, like don't do your most immediate, your gut reaction, your knee jerk reaction, right? Which usually probably would be violent, right? You just did it to me, I'm going to do it back to you. But if you take a step back creatively and think, okay, how can I respond in a way, again, that the goal of my response isn't to one up the other person or to beat them or anything like that. It's to think about, okay, how can I respond in a way that will disarm that oppressor, to make them question what they're doing, right? Yeah. So this is the whole point of turn the other cheek and let them strike you on the other one. Like that would make the person go, whoa, what kind of a person responds this way? Why? How could you even do that, right? Or if you're compelled to walk a mile, that's all you're required to do legally. But you would say, let me go another one. And that actually, at the time, would have presented a problem, because to ask them to go 2 miles, like now that guy's in trouble because he's not supposed to do that. And again, it's not intended to get them in trouble. It's intended to sort of to respond in a way that shines a light on the injustice of the act. Okay, and so take that as a way of saying, okay, now how can we think about different ways to respond that are nonviolent? And there's wonderful examples throughout history of what people have done to respond in these ways, which I talk about in the book because I wanted to take it away from the theory into the practical, right? Yeah,
and that's really important. Like I think about the like Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He was very much an advocate of nonviolent resistance, and you look at the movement that he built that was ultimately successful, at least successful in the changing the laws. Who knows? I'm not sure how successful it was in changing the minds and the racism in general, but you saw people literally turning the other cheek. Like just when the police came after them, when they were beating them, right? They did not return violence for violence. There's this quote that he says from the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. That he says, violence cannot, or dark cannot drive out dark, only light can do that.
Yes.
Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly right. And so there's been, I only grabbed a couple of examples, but I mean, starting with the one that everyone always brings up, which is that, okay, Keith, if you're telling me that nonviolent resistance can overthrow fascist regimes and things like this, then why is it we had to go to World War II and overthrow Hitler, right?
Right.
Well, it's because, I mean, creative nonviolence only works when you do it. So it's hard to look at an example where, let's look at an example where it wasn't used and then ask the question, why didn't it work? Well, because for the most part, people weren't employing it. However, there are several
it's a logic
examples.
Fallacy.
Yes, exactly. But there are several examples in World War II where there were pockets of creative nonviolent resistance. And in those cases, it did work. In fact, Walter Wink, in his book, Engaging the Powers, talks about they interviewed some Nazi generals after World War II. And those generals admitted that in cases where they encountered creative nonviolent resistance, this was in Denmark, Holland, Norway, and in some pockets of France and Belgium, that they had no idea how to respond. They were powerless. They were like, we don't even know, what do we do now, right? Because they're not going along with what we're saying. They're not responding to the fear. And again, fascism is all about fear. If you don't give in to the fear, if you show them, make an outward display that you are not intimidated, you are not afraid of them, you don't take them seriously. In that case in World War II, Nazi generals had no response. But then there are other examples as well. Like one of the coolest ones, I would just say for your listeners, if they were curious about this kind of thing, there's an excellent documentary. It's called Pray the Devil Back to Hell. And this is a true example. It's a documentary about what happened in West Africa in the Republic of Liberia in 2003. There was a 14-year-long civil war. There was a fascist dictator in charge. And basically a bunch of ordinary women, Muslims and Christian women, and some who just had no faith at all, but just were mothers who were concerned about what was going on, their sons being conscripted into this civil war. They gathered together, they sat, they sang, they prayed together in protest. They shut down the marketplace. And they did this consistently for days and weeks and months until eventually they forced their president into peace talks in Ghana. And they staged a silent protest outside of his presidential palace consistently until after 14 years, not only was a peace agreement reached, that dictator was deposed in an election. And one of the women in charge of that movement, the nonviolent movement, was elected the president. So she ended up becoming the leader of Liberia. I mean, the documentary is astounding.
That sounds amazing.
No shots were fired. It was just completely these mothers using the power of love and resistance, creative or nonviolent resistance, to genuinely overthrow a dictator. So there's lots of examples I talk about in the book. These things can be done. I've also heard examples. This has been recently here in America. I came across a group of protesters. I can't remember what they're called, but they basically they show up to protests and they dress up as clowns. And the whole point again is to just mock the fear, right? We're not afraid of you. This is ridiculous, right? And they have funny signs and they do silly, things with the crowd and with the police that are standing there, and they make people laugh and they disarm the whole situation. These are just some examples. So
and I've seen some of the things that I've seen recently in America, and I know that we also have an international audience as well. But some of the things that I've seen in America, some of this creative nonviolent resistance, you can actually watch it work live. Like when ICE is rolling down the streets in the western part of the country and in tanks, right? Like there's this moment where people formed a human wall, right? And they started advancing on the tank.
Yes.
And you have to be a uniquely troubled individual to be driving that tank and to keep going forward over the peaceful resisting citizens. And they did it, right? They backed up and they went away and they protected all kinds of immigrants that were in that area. Yeah,
that's right. And see, you mentioned Martin Luther King, right? The thing about Martin Luther King that was so powerful was they intentionally, practiced nonviolent resistance in front of television cameras. But again, way back then, we're talking, they had to wait and hope that the news teams would show up with a camera, right? That's TBS and ABC. Again, this is all there was. Today, it's different because it's even better today because everyone has a phone in their pocket and they can live stream on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube and Facebook. And so when these kinds of things happen, people just pull out their phone and start filming this stuff. It's just go for live, right? And so there's power in these things. And in the book, I know you know this because this is kind of what inspired, I think, this conversation. Erica Chenoweth has done incredible research in this area. I quote her in my book. She has a book called Why Civil Resistance Works, Nonviolence in the Past and the Future. And she did this research. She looked at nonviolent campaigns from the 1900s up until 2006. Okay. That's a long time. And what she found was that nonviolent campaigns were almost twice as successful as violent insurgencies, and also more than twice as likely to achieve at least partial success, and to create significant concessions and things like this. And so, and she has all kinds of great examples like that.
Yeah, and I know, like in your book, Jesus Unarmed, you also talk about the percentage rule that she found out, right?
Yes. Yeah, like it's something like 3.2% of the population. Is all that's required to really sort of be the tipping point to turn things around, which also gives us hope, right? Because again, keep in mind, Christian nationalists are not the majority. They're not even the majority of conservative Christians.
Not even close. And, one of the things that is encouraging to me, we're talking about Jesus Unarmed, your book, and talking about people that believe what Jesus said, which is, nonviolence and all of this stuff. Those are often progressive religious people. And the PRI did a survey a little while ago, and they found that 18% of Americans would call themselves progressive religious people. So when you're talking about 3.5%, you don't need any of the fundamentalists. You don't need any of the evangelicals. You need, you just need 3.5%, 14% of the progressive religious people could stay at home. And if 3.5% of them just participated in the sustained nonviolent resistance, you can make headway.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah. And again, that's what Chenoweth's research is so wonderful, because it does document that it is the case. And when you see that, over 90% more effective is nonviolence to violence. It's also something else she points out that's also, I think, really important to keep in mind. If we are wanting to be people who are sort of like joining the resistance, and we feel powerless with what's happening, even what just happened yesterday with Donald Trump basically saying, I'm declaring martial law in the nation's capital. And even though it's on a 30-year low, crime is at a 30-year low, it's suddenly an emergency
Yeah. And I live in the DC area. So crime, this is wild. Crime last year was at a 30-year low in the DC area. This year, it's 26% below last year.
Below that. Yeah. That's crazy. Yeah. And so, what she points out also is that for these nonviolent movements, that one of the ways that they can be most effective is that it takes an enormous amount of energy and resources to maintain a fascist regime, right?
Right.
And coordination between law enforcement and government and all these different things that have to happen. And so one thing we can do if we want to be a part of the resistance and to be very effective is to focus on that. So in other words, slow things down, make it very, very difficult, make it so ridiculously difficult that more expensive, harder to organize, harder to communicate, harder to get these things together. And so especially if you work, even if you have a small job in the government somewhere, right? Or the post office, right? Take an extra day or two to deliver that that summons or that, it's something like, what I'm saying?
If they all just took their vacation time or their sick leave, right?
That's exactly right. And again, these are the kind of things that fascist regimes don't know how to respond to. Most of the time, they're not even aware that it's happening. They're just frustrated that, wow, why is this taking so long? And why is this, the gears grind so slow? Because we can slow those things down and we can make it more difficult and more expensive for them to maintain power.
Yeah. So clearly, Keith, you wrote this whole book, Jesus Unarmed, and you have thought very deeply about the history of all of this. You've sort of investigated these different moments in time and place where, fascist regimes were in place. And so here's what I would love your reaction to. Yesterday, the president of the United States decided that he was going to deploy 800 National Guards people to the nation's capital, and he was going to federalize the police force, and he was deploying hundreds of people from the federal agencies like FBI and Homeland Security and DEA, all of these places. So when you hear that, when you watch that happen, I live here. I just a couple of nights ago, I saw with my own eyes people in tactical, full tactical garb, guns, the whole thing, patrolling in groups of 10, patrolling an area that is well known for queer-owned businesses, and nightclubs, and bars, Black and brown-owned businesses, going up and down U Street. When you see that, when you hear that through sort of your knowledge of history, what do you think? What is your reaction? What is this? Where do you see this in connection there?
Well, it's really hard. I mean, it's one of these problems when it comes to this question of nonviolence and how nonviolent can be effective. in the moment when something like that is happening, right?
Right.
Like, for example, and that's a good example, but also in examples of like, you're at a mall and suddenly there's a guy with a gun and now he's opening fire and you hear the gunshots, everyone's running for cover, right? And to say, okay, Keith, how can nonviolence help in that situation? It's like,
well, and I'm
that's
not
already
I'm not
the
even
failure
talking
of
about
nonviolence, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
and I'm not even
in that
talking about
situation,
what do we do nonviolently. I'm talking about what connections do you see between this moment and other moments in history?
Yeah. Oh no, absolutely. It definitely does make me feel like, we are living some surreal, I feel like I know what Christians felt like in Nazi Germany, right?
Right.
Who didn't buy into the Christian nationalism, which was going on there as well. And you see these things happening and your heart breaks for your country, your heart breaks for, the end of human rights and your freedom's being taken away. And I feel the emotion of it. I don't know. I feel the powerlessness as well. Like it's happening right now. Okay, in this moment, what can I do? Maybe not very much in that moment, but there are things we can do, in our own personal lives as well as like, there's a protest, go to that protest, hold up that sign, right? Because that's again, the power of fascism is the fear. And if you can, and so that the antidote to fear is courage. And if we have courage to stand up, to go out, to add our voices to other voices and say, this isn't right. This isn't what America stands for. This is not what we stand for. We're not going to lay down and let this happen. That's one thing you can do. But yeah, when you see those kind of things happening, I think it's a massive. I actually wrote a blog post yesterday. I didn't post it because it was so negative.
But
the blog post, it's in a draft mode right now on my Pathos blog, and it was basically like today was the end of the American Empire. It's over. We had a good run. It's over because, I mean, to me, this is one of the final steps when the president of the United States is literally on trumped up charges, trumped up evidence. He's basically lying. He's totally lying about the reason he needs to do it. We all know he's lying. The media knows he's lying, right? MSNBC, while he was given the thing, ran the statistics right next to his face as he was lying. So we know it's a lie, and yet he's seizing power. Which again shouldn't surprise anybody. He said he was going to do this, and so I see what's happening, and I just want to be like, man, it just feels like it's over. How do I think though we can come back from it. I do think we can, but again, it's going to take a whole lot more of this courage. And again, the more of us who do stand up, the more of us who have the courage to do whatever is in our power, to resist it. This is the way it's going to work. This is the only way it's going to happen.
Yeah. And speaking of writing, you and I both are contributors to something called The Collective. It's TheQuollect TIVE.com. QUO, but QUO Collective. THEQUO Elective, right? And we both wrote some articles yesterday. I wrote this firsthand account of the people in tactical gear in DC. If people want to go check that out, they can. And if you want to subscribe to it, you can use my code UnBelief. And that'll get you, I think it's like a 20% discount, but you can read my article for free and yours as well, on the front page. Here's, as we were transitioning into what people can actually do, I think one of the things that's really important is to recognize not everybody actually can, right? There are a number of different factors that means that you can't go to the protest. You can't stand in front of the tank, right? Which means if you can, it is incumbent on you to do that. And not everybody can speak out. There's all kinds of reasons that people may or may not be safe to speak out. Yes. But if you can, it is important to do so with whatever platform you have, right? Yeah. You write at Patheos and the Collective. Yeah. I write. I also have these social media platforms. And so it's important for us to do that, right? Yes. To use the platforms that we have, and for anyone who has anything to use what you've got, right? Yeah,
that's right. That's exactly right. And I think we did a podcast yesterday that came out today, actually. With you and Stuart Deloney and Jesse Dollamore. And I think one of the things someone said, I think it might have been Jesse actually, who said, that so Jesse Dollamore's got, I don't know how many, probably 100,000 followers on YouTube, and you've got hundreds of thousands of followers between TikTok and YouTube and all that stuff. Yeah. I probably got like 3,000 or 4,000, but Jesse's comment was like, even if you only have 20 followers, if you have 50 followers, don't act like, well, it doesn't matter if I say something. It doesn't matter if I speak out. No, it does. It really does.
Right. And it really does.
Yeah. You don't have to say, well, I'll have to wait till I get 10,000 followers before it matters. No, it matters now, because you do have an influence on those 10, 15, 20 people, 50 people, however many it is. And if they resonate with what you say and they share it, then you've exponentially increased it beyond that. So, and I think it's important. What you can. Yeah.
Right. I think the other thing is that is important, especially for people who may not have a large social media presence, is they can help game the algorithm. And by that, I mean, when you see a post by me or anyone else, your friend, you like it, you share it, you comment it, do all three, because all of those signals end up boosting it and putting it in front of more people. That's right. Yeah, Keith, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. Thank you so much. Again, Keith Giles, author of Jesus Unarmed. You can get it anywhere you can find books, but it's on Amazon, and there is an audio book, so you should definitely check that out. Thanks, Keith.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Jeremy.
That's it. That's the podcast. Shout out to the Choir Network, to Patheos, to Matthew and Keith, who make everything happen. Now, get out of here. Go do something to make the world a better place, okay? We'll see you next time.